Are we unmuted yet? We are unmuted. Welcome. We're live. This is the Atheist Experience Live. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Phil Session. Woo!
Hello, hello. How is everyone out there?
So, we are a live public access television show that's no longer done live on public access.
Not at all.
It's
just
kind of like
YouTube.
a live internet show. You can go to atheist-experience.com for more information about how to watch the show, as well as information about how to call the show. The telephone number will appear right there. I need to be like in front of the FSM to show it.
Yes.
Layers, man. And that's 1-512-686-0279. We have a preference for theist callers, or at least with people who might disagree with us on something, so that we can have some kind of discussion. And after the show is over, we get together and go to dinner at
Threadgill's.
And the address for Threadgill's will appear at the bottom of the screen as well. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. This is live TV. It's like, I've had a crazy busy week. I went to Missouri and helped my dad move from Kansas City to St. Louis again. He's like moved 11 times, and most of them have been between those two cities.
Yeah.
I'm the executive producer for Austin Magic at the Capitol, which is a magic show coming up here in Austin, July 9th. There's actually two shows. There's a matinee and an evening show featuring Brian Brushwood and CJ Johnson. And you can find out more about that at magicatthecapital.com. Shameless promotion on my behalf. I even brought flyers and plastic. It's occupying a lot of my time, but for those of you who know me, you know that I absolutely love magic. I've been doing it since I was about 3. And so I'm looking forward to this show. But today is Phil's debut. We've been waiting for a long time. I mean, you and I have known each other for a couple, 3 years now.
Yeah, I guess about 3 years now. Something like that.
And
so I first started coming up to the show, to the after dinner portion.
And Phil's been active with the ACA to the point of being on the board of directors for the Atheist Community of Austin.
Yes.
So technically, I kind of work for him, along with everybody else. And after Martin left, and I didn't get a chance. I had a chance, actually. I missed the chance to thank Martin for his many years of working on the show. So a personal thank you for Martin for all he's done for the ACA and the show.
You're awesome.
But it left a gap in our co-host thing. And you know what? Phil was my first person I reached out to. I like it when the first person I ask to do something, they just say yes. It's like, cool. I don't have to do any more work. I don't have to look around. So, I tell you what, while they're lining up callers, why don't you give everybody a bit of your background and some thoughts on some issues that we talked about beforehand? You've got some announcements to make for the ACA.
Yes. So, hello, everyone. I'm Phil. Nice to meet everyone out there. I've been coming to the show, like I said, it's been about 3 years now since I started coming up to the show just to take a look and see what was going on. But I'm originally from the Dallas area. As a matter of fact, I was brought up religious. On one half of my family, it was Baptist, Southern Baptist on that side, and the other side was Free Church of God in Christ. So that created an interesting difference in the churches that I grew up in. There was a difference on that side, which was interesting. One, the Free Church was very musically oriented, which I loved. I loved the tambourines and all that kind of stuff that was about it. But in any case,
I can play the tambourine.
So can I.
It's on my list of instruments.
You have quite a few instruments that you play now.
I'm better at the tambourine than I am at some of the other ones.
But so I grew up a believer, like I said, and while I was in college, I started getting more interested in my belief that I still held, and I started looking up specific Bible verses, specifically ones in Leviticus that referred to homosexuality, things of that sort, trying to reconcile my faith with the fact of me being gay and trying to somehow make that work in my mind. And so I went online to try to find some more information about it. I came across the site. I wish I could find the site, and I actually tried to find that particular site that gave all this interesting insight, but it allows you to pick up a single verse and look through different translations in the past to see how it's changed, things of that sort. And as I was looking through those type of things, I found that the verse that I was looking at in Leviticus that references mankind shall not lie with mankind as with a woman, that particular said it disappeared in one of the translations that I was looking at. As soon as I saw it, at that time, I was like, I found it. This is it. I found it. This lets me know that there's a lot of hands in the pot in religion, and it's been changed over. So that made so much sense in my mind at the time. So at that point, I became spiritual, but not religious. And so I adopted that title, and I kept going. And that for years, I would have my own private worship sessions where I would play music at the house, like different gospel songs, and just dance around, or while I was cooking or cleaning or whatever else. So in my mind, this made perfect sense. This was my praise session. And so, but over time, I started questioning it, because I didn't go to church or anything like that. It was just my own private session at home with music and things of that sort. So after a while, I started considering, why was I call myself spiritual but non-religious, because I didn't want to be affiliated with Christian, because of course the hands in the pots. But in my mind, I was wondering why I was holding on to this one belief set among the thousands that have been presented over the years, all the different religions that are out there. Why was I holding on to this particular set? And that's when I started drifting away from that portion, because I couldn't substantiate why I was holding this one belief system in such a high regard and disregarding the thousands of others, out of hand. And so over time, when I grew up, I actually never heard the word atheist at all, ever growing up. And so when I actually became a non-believer, I actually didn't have a word to associate with that, except for that I didn't believe in God, or I didn't go to church, or something like that. And it wasn't until I found some podcasts on YouTube that I actually understood that this word is what I was. And I remember actually shedding a few tears at that point, because I actually had a word to call myself, and I didn't even know that I was looking for a word to call myself, but there it was. This was the actual word. But in neither of my churches, it was never mentioned. It was always referenced as non-believers or doubters, or those that are being manipulated by the devil. That was always the terminology that would be used to describe someone that had fallen away from the faith, something to that effect. And so once I became that, I took that under my wing. I didn't say anything to anyone too soon. I kind of eased into it, kind of accepted that label, because I had in my mind built up all of the stigma around that particular label, that these people were devil worshipers, or they worked for the devil in order to condemn and to damn other people, to bring other people down to that damnation. That was the way that it was presented to me, as, this is what people who call themselves atheists are. And so I wasn't too quick to adopt the label.
It's one of the things that causes a constant problem, because there's not a clear, the label is used in a bunch of different ways by people who use that label to apply to themselves. They still may disagree on subtle different things about it, but there's a lot of misinformation, or in many cases it's not mentioned. And I don't know which is worse, the fact that somebody could grow up and not hear the word atheist, or that someone could grow up all those years and whenever they hear the word atheist, their only understanding of it is what their preacher happened to say about it. Right. So is it better to not have the label, or to have the label misrepresented?
Yeah, but once I got to that point, I started coming up here to the Atheist Experience. I came very often, driving about an hour and a half or so to come visit the show. And I came came so often enough that I was very familiar with the host, a lot of the crew, and I started becoming a crew member myself, actually being behind the scenes. So It's interesting being on this side of the camera.
It's a very different experience.
Watching myself versus just being the one behind the scenes pushing buttons.
There were a lot of people who asked, hey, now that Martin's gone, what's the process by which you get a new co-host for the show?
Sure.
There isn't one. At the end of the day, the reality is this show is kind of like a mostly functional family, occasionally dysfunctional family. And we have whatever hosts and co-hosts we feel like having. When I took over 11 years ago or so, Ashley was the host then and was wanting to step down, and I had volunteered to do it, but I was pretty new to it, so there was a period of time where Russell hosted and then I would alternate in between, and it was a matter of just kind of getting used to people. I mean, my first episode of the show was basically an accident. Jeff D. should remember that it was his week, and I happened to be there, and Ashley was like, hey, you want to do live TV? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so the process really is the people who are currently on the show get together and talk about, do we want to replace someone who's left, or do we want to shrink down so that everybody gets more time? Because with 5 co-hosts, you're on once maybe a month.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other thing is we want people who we know, who we've interacted with, who we have a good rapport with, so that you could be the most knowledgeable person and it would be absolutely terrible TV if you don't get along with who you're working with.
Right. Right.
It also could be that I might know somebody really, really well, but they're not necessarily good for TV. So there's this familiarity, and Phil is somebody who's been around, been to my house many times, and involved behind the scenes with people on the show. It's just, oh well, which member of the family is ready to take a step up here and do it? And that's what's happened, with John Iacletti, with you, with pretty much all of us. We're kind of free form.
It's been pretty awesome. It's been pretty awesome, that's for sure. But I'll look forward to it, and will do my best and have some fun. And
we've got a bunch of callers lined up, but there were several announcements that you wanted to get to before we jumped onto callers.
Yes. So I did want to take some time to mention out the ACA is now volunteering with the Texas Ramps Project. I think when you were last on, you mentioned it with Anthony. They were on. They mentioned that upcoming ramp bill that was happening. It was supposed to happen on yesterday, but unfortunately got canceled by the Texas Ramp Project for the lack of issued permits or something to that effect. So the next ramp project that the ACA will be participating in is July 23rd. We're trying to target the fourth Saturday of every month going forward, things of that sort. But it's an awesome project. It's going out to build wheelchair ramps for people that have severe motor disabilities, or there may be, in this case, the last one that we did in Austin, it was a very simple ramp. It wasn't too bad, but it was steps on every single platform out of their house. So they were unable to roll the wheelchairs down, or the walker even itself, to get down easily off of their house. And that's how it is for a lot of these houses. These are usually residents that are very low income, residents that can't afford to build these ramps for themselves or to hire anyone to come out to do anything like that. And there's a large backlog. There's a lot of people that are on a waiting list, and some people have waited multiple years to get a ramp built because it's done by necessity, and also they need volunteers to actually do it. So the ACA is ramping up to keep. I figured you'd catch that. I see what you did there. Ramping up to actually be a consistent volunteer to help get those things started. So that'll be July 23rd, and you can find out and sign up for it on Facebook and also Meetup on that side to let us know that you'll be coming. There unfortunately won't be a ramp bill in August because the ACA will actually have a booth at the Austin Pride Fest. That'll be happening here in Austin. So we won't have a ramp build out there. We'll be out there bright and early in the morning, 7 or 8 or however it's going to take to get us out there. But we'll have a booth set up. So if you're if you're out for Pride in Austin, in the Austin area, feel free to come by, say hello, take a picture, or take a button or whatever else we have that's out there for you to take.
A thong. I'm thinking about wearing a thong myself. No, I don't want to scare anybody off. I love the Austin Pride Fest, and if I'm in town, I go every year. And I'm in town this year, so I'll be there.
Oh, awesome.
I just really wish, I love living here in Austin, but August, I mean, I know the goal is to have mostly naked people out there, or people who are mostly naked, I suppose. And August is a good time for that. But
Texas weather.
Holy mackerel. So we'll have fans and cold water and everything else. But it's, even though
it's a lot of fun.
Austin Pride around, I've enjoyed it every year we went. So.
Yeah. And we won't be having a ramp bill also in September because the fourth Saturday in September, the 24th, is actually the ACA Bat Cruise.
Ooh.
It's that time again. Of course. So
the standard line, Austin has the largest metropolitan bat population in the world. Over 1 million bats live under the Congress Creek Bridge and go out nightly to feed at sunset, which is why we don't have a problem with mosquitoes.
Which is awesome.
One of the things that makes Austin an incredibly nice place to live. Who's our guest this year?
So this year, we're announcing that we will have Greta Christina will be joining us for the Bat Cruise. So we'll be having our lecture prior to the actual cruise itself. So she'll be there to give a lecture to everyone that's showing up for the Bat Cruise and to hang around, sign some books if y'all have some books for her, things of that sort. So we're excited to have her. It'll be an exciting time, as it always is. It's always a lot of fun. You can bring food or snacks, things of that sort. Bring drinks, for those that are of the correct age, the appropriate age. Oh, dear.
There are several of us that bring guitars and ukuleles and other stuff. We could have a whole, godless band jam session up on the upper deck. You can't actually register for it yet because the ticketing's not.
No. That information will be coming to our website hopefully here soon. So just keep your eyes peeled for that, and I'm sure we'll let you know on a forthcoming show when you can go ahead and buy those tickets, and we can go out and have a ball out there.
In the meantime, you could buy tickets for that magic show I mentioned, but not to
shameless plug. Here.
So you want to take some callers?
Go for it. Let's do it.
We've got Ron in Chicago. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, what's going on?
We're doing a TV show. What's going on with you?
I'd like to talk about intelligent design and evolution, specifically a claim that you've made in the past about evolution being a fact in the context of common descent.
Well, what I said was that evolution is a fact, that there have been observed changes. Now, common descent, I happen to think is well supported by the evidence, but common descent is not the same thing. So a theory explains a fact. So you have a fact, which is the diversity of life on Earth. That is just a fact. And we also know that it's a fact that things change over time. Evolution by natural selection is the theory that explains that. And when it comes to an issue of common descent, things like chromosome 2 and and all the other elements that go together to show that the best explanation is common ancestry. But what did you want to ask? And also, why are you calling us?
Yes, I was curious as to why when you posed the question, when I was reading off of the screen, the call screener's notes, why you would call this show specifically for that question regarding evolution rather than approaching someone that perhaps studies in that field, things of that sort.
Oh, I speak to molecular biologists and biochemists on a regular basis, offline, online, and so on. But I'm specifically calling this show because I've heard Matt on a regular basis talking about evolution as if it is fact. And in the context of change happening, I would agree with that. Change happens. We would all agree with that.
Great. So we agree that it's a fact. So we agree that it's a fact.
Evolution, but that's not what you said in the context of the discussion.
Well, I don't know what I said. I don't know what I've said in the past.
On my computer.
I
have the clip saved on the computer, so I know what.
Okay, then Ron, email me the clip, or, I mean, could you at least have the conversation now based on what I'm actually saying? I'm not gonna say.
I'm trying to.
Okay, go ahead.
Right now. So, in the context of what you're saying right now, I would agree with that 100%. That
cool.
Change happens, even to the extent of causing something that might be perceived to be new. For example, the ability to digest myelinase, or mutations that might cause red hair, or mutations that might allow us to digest milk.
So since we're in Ron, since we're in agreement.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Since we're in agreement, what's the issue?
No, we're not in agreement.
We're not.
We're not. I don't know why you're saying that.
You just said you agreed with what I just said.
And no, in numerous discussions in the past, when you're talking about evolution, when you're describing evolution in the context of the argument, you're talking about small incremental changes leading on to new complexities through millions of years. It's that specific claim of that mechanism's creative power that I'm calling into question right now.
Okay, and my question to you is, do you have something where I said that this is a fact?
Yes, I've got about 13 different clips from different videos where you made that statement.
That's amazing.
On my laptop at home.
That's amazing, because I'm one of the people who's probably most cautious with their words, especially when it comes to issues like this. So by all means, put together an email, point me to those clips. I'll be happy to look through them, and if you're correct, I'll retract stuff.
Well, I'm absolutely willing to do so, but just for the sake of argument, are you willing to talk about what evolution can do here in this discussion?
I'm not a biologist. What I can do is talk about my understanding of evolutionary theory, but I'm also wondering why it's particularly relevant. Because you understand that there are religious people who accept the science behind evolution as well, right?
Oh, yeah, I understand that full well.
Okay.
But I think that it's relevant because even though it's relevant in the same way that intelligent design is relevant, because even though it doesn't necessarily intend to prove any specific belief in God, the implications of it happen to be religious friendly. In the same way with evolution. People that end up being converted they end up losing their faith if they end up agreeing with any information suggesting that common descent is true. So
No, Ron, you just acknowledged that there are plenty of Christians out there who accept common descent.
Right.
Okay, and there are plenty of, as long as this isn't a religious issue about whether or not you accept common descent, then it's an issue about whether or not you accept the evidence for common descent. I happen to accept the evidence for common descent. I would not and do not think that I have claimed that common descent is a fact. What I've claimed is that the evidence points to this as the most reasonable conclusion based on the available evidence, and that it's incredibly strong, and that intelligent design, on the other hand, isn't science and doesn't offer us anything.
Well, right, but we both understand that whether you're a theist, a pantheist, or an atheist, there are different subsets descriptions under that position. So not all atheists have the same perception of information.
Correct.
Just like not all theists have the same perception. So even though it doesn't necessarily lead somebody to atheism or to Christianity, whether we talk about intelligent design or evolution, the implications of this information does tend to lead certain individuals either towards atheism or away from it.
Which has absolutely no bearing on whether or not it's correct and true. And when intelligent design offers...
I never said it did.
And
I never said it did.
Okay, then I don't understand what your point is, because basically what you've said is, hey, there's this theory, and some people accept it and some people don't. And while it's not necessarily tied to religion, in some cases there are people who accept it and this leads them away from their religion. Mm-hmm. So what? That's just the facts of life.
Well, right. I came in here with the direct purpose to get into that evidence for what is true.
Well, then you need to go talk to scientists, because that's not my job, nor is it anything that I'm particularly interested in doing.
Well, I think you're being a bit unfair here, Matt, because
Why?
You're also not a philosopher as well, but you talk about philosophy on a regular basis.
How do you know I'm not a philosopher?
Because I've listened to you speak, and you don't have a degree in philosophy.
So you have to have a degree in philosophy to be a philosopher?
No.
Where did the first philosophers get their degrees?
The point of the matter is, Matt, is that you speak with a lot of authority on biology.
I speak about no, I don't speak with much authority on biology. As a matter of fact, I'm consistently pointing out when people call in the show that the issue of evolution is not one that's relevant to whether or not a God exists, that I'm not an expert on it, and then they want to argue with me anyway, so I tell them what I do understand and what my views are about it. That's completely separate, because if there of these two fields, biological sciences and philosophy, there is one in which I am pretty strongly versed and another that I'm not.
Okay, well, that's what the problem is, Matt. I mean, you seem to... Like when you're talking to some people, it seems like, and I'm not trying to say this to be disrespectful to you, but it seems like when you're talking to some people that don't know about the topic, you'll make statements like, okay, evolution is fact.
No.
So you're talking about common descent.
Okay.
But I'm in here, I'm trying to be respectful just to have a discussion with you. And I feel like you're trying to avoid having the discussion with me.
Okay, what is the discussion you want to have? Because if you want to have a discussion that I'm not interested in, we're not having it.
Okay, so, all right. I think this is ridiculous, but how about we keep the heat on me then about intelligent design? Would that be better?
I don't need to put any heat on intelligent design. It hasn't met its burden of proof. It is pointless for me to sit around talking about something that hasn't actually offered anything.
Well, it has. You know what the argument of intelligent design is, right?
There's an argument for intelligent design?
Intelligent design is an abductive argument.
I understand that.
Based on, okay. So, I mean, why are you trying to say proving and all this other stuff? What are you trying to get at when you're saying that intelligent design hasn't proven something?
Because it hasn't. So when we're talking about, for example, the biological sciences, there are actual scientists who go out and find evidence, who assess and evaluate that evidence, who submit it up for peer review, and who construct a scientific model that serves as the best current explanation of that information. Science, as I've repeatedly said for well over a decade now, doesn't make proclamations of truth, which is why I don't believe you when you claim that you have all these examples of me stating that this is just a fact. What you probably have are examples of me saying that evolution is a fact, and that the theory of evolution by natural selection is the theory that attempts to explain that fact, because that is pretty much my standard answer on that. But when you talk about intelligent design, you don't have anybody who's doing any evidence. You have the Wedge document. You have the Institute for Creation Research and other organizations that are similar to this, who are, instead of providing evidence for their position, merely trying to poke holes in the current model and failing to do so.
Yeah, that's what I that's what I always found so interesting about the intelligent design argument, because it was mostly, seems to be a lot of it, wow, what are words?
Yeah.
It mostly seems to be centered around poking holes, like you said, in evolution, not necessarily coming up with evidence to substantiate that hypothesis in and of itself. And so it was interesting to me that poking holes in evolution, that will do nothing to actually further the substantiation of the claim that the theory of the hypothesis of intelligent design is correct.
Well, I would say, I mean, you guys said a lot there, and I'm going to try to respond to each point that you made as best as I can. But the first thing that you said about peer review, there is a database on the Intelligent Design website if people want to go look at their different articles that they publish against evolution and attempting to make an argument for intelligent design. But I would say that because this is a causal argument, we do not need a peer-reviewed article to tell us whether or not the implications of the data that intelligent design is calling into question is true, because one of the purposes for the peer review process is to help to increase scientific knowledge. Intelligent design is a causal argument calling into question previous knowledge in the past. That's what it's attempting to do so. So the very fact that it is calling on previous knowledge in the past, it would be making a causal argument based on knowledge, appealing to, just basic information that all mankind that is exposed to modern society knows and understands. So
I will give $20 to anybody who takes that last clip from him and produces anything that makes sense or is substantive about it. That was as tap dancey as I've ever heard. Because to me, it sounds...
What do you mean?
Okay, my point was that intelligent design isn't actually doing... The intelligent design community isn't actually doing scientific research that would support their claim. And your argument is that doesn't matter because...
I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what point you were even responding to then.
I was responding to, you made a lot of statements, and I was trying to respond to each one of them. You mentioned peer-reviewed, and I gave you my response to peer-reviewed, but I haven't gotten to that point
yet.
Yeah,
and I don't understand how your argument in any way removes the value of peer review. We're not saying that peer review is the end-all, be-all. There are mistakes made in everything, including in journals. But what I'm saying is the peer review process, where people set out to replicate and confirm results. I mean, we know that these things are horrible, but they're the best that we've got. And you're basically saying that you don't have any need for them.
No. We have need for the peer review process.
Then why has the intelligent design community gone out and created its own journals? In order to claim that they have peer review, they've created their own journals because they're not getting peer reviewed in actual respectable journals that have been around.
Well, I'll get to that right now in a second, but you made another point that you just responded to me with beforehand, so I'd like to respond to that if I can. I do not agree that, I guess it would be both abiogenesis and evolution, because you have to have an established system before any of these things that intelligent design is talking about can end up happening.
So why are you rolling abiogenesis?
Evolutionist, but what I'm saying is
Ron, why are you rolling abiogenesis into this? It's not under discussion.
Okay, well, if you don't want me to talk about abiogenesis, what I'm about to say is still relevant to evolution. I do not agree with the fact that they are trying to investigate to see if any of these components can actually happen through an evolutionary process. I think that a lot of the things what they're doing is they're trying to manufacture results, or they're more so just comparing homologies and declaring that one.
So you think the bulk of science, that has been done on evolutionary theory is just scientists intentionally manufacturing evidence to support the model?
No, what I'm saying is that there's absolutely no evidence at all. There's been no testing, no experimentations showing that any amount of incremental steps and changes can build the specific structures that intelligent design calls into question, like turbines, motors, and codes that are found inside of the cell.
Are you making a
mechanisms can accumulate to those changes?
Are you making a distinction between macroevolution and microevolution, such that you would accept macroevolution but not microevolution?
Well, some scientists I talk to, they don't like it when I try to muddy the waters and talk about the differences between macro and micro because they say that there's no distinction. But what I'm saying is that
I'm asking you if
happening.
I'm asking you, Ron. It was a simple question. I'm asking you if you see a distinction, and are you willing to accept one and not the other?
Well, do I see a distinction of changes happening? Yes, I see a distinction of changes happening, but I see absolutely no evidence that these small changes or alterations, like in proteins or whatever, can accumulate over to the specific structures that intelligent design is calling into question. There's nothing indicating that can actually happen.
Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you then, because it seems to me that you're just saying this can't happen when the bulk of scientists who actually spend their life studying this disagree with you. So why don't you talk to them and not me?
Okay, well, saying that a bunch of scientists agree with you is not really evidence that suggests that it can actually happen.
You're correct, but you know what else isn't evidence? Saying I don't accept the bulk of what scientists have to say about this. If there are two people sitting in the room and one of them says, here's my thing, and I'm going against the massive, overwhelming majority of scientific experts in this field, and the other person is sitting there saying, here's my model, and I'm going with the overwhelming majority, which one do you put your money on?
You put the money on the one who's got the evidence.
I agree. I agree.
Right,
you put the money on the one with the evidence. And so which one of those two is more likely to have the evidence in any given scenario? The one where the majority of scientific experts in a field are in agreement, or the one that is outcast and separate from all that majority? Which one?
Again, the one who has the evidence. You cannot sit over your
Ron, I asked the question.
The majority say something. It doesn't make it true.
Ron, I asked a question. In almost every situation, if there's a two people standing here, one of which is siding, or one of which is a group that consists of the majority, the overwhelming majority of experts in a field, and the other one is an outlier, most of the time, which one does the evidence side with?
The one who's got the evidence, because in the past,
you're done.
Many people.
If you can't answer the question honestly, you don't get to claim I'm dodging your conversation, because I think you're aware, as is everybody else, that most of the time, the reason the majority of scientists and the reason the majority of experts in this field hold a position is because that is where the evidence has led. The other possibility is that the majority of experts in a field have disregarded the evidence in favor of some bias, and that you would have to demonstrate. But when you try to avoid the question of most likely, where does the evidence rest? I'm not making assertions about absolute certainty or truth or any of that. I'm just talking about a scientific model. And if you say that the majority of evidence lies with those people who have the majority of the evidence, when the question was, is it more likely to be consistent with the majority of experts in a field or outliers, now you're the one who is dishonestly avoiding conversation. Great first call there, Phil.
Yeah, that was the inaugural one. How about that?
It bugs me because, and by the way, feel free to send your email and point to all the times where I said evolution is a fact, and I will point out how you're wrong, just like I have today. I am not claiming, and to my knowledge, I have never claimed that the theory of evolution by natural selection is a fact, because I have enough understanding of this to understand that it is a theory that describes facts. It is a model that gives information about the facts. The observed facts are the change in allele frequency over time, which is the foundation of evolution. The observed facts are the biodiversity on the planet. And what is the best explanation for the biodiversity on the planet? Those are the facts. Scientific models and theories are formed to describe those facts, to explain those facts, given the available evidence. So this idea that you think I've been running around claiming that a theory is a fact, when I can't remember. I must have been probably 10 when I figured out the difference between a theory and a fact. So you'll have to come pretty strong with evidence that I've been confusing the two.
Yeah, and while he was talking, when he was mentioning that the theory of intelligent design, that it seemed to me, I was trying to kind of parse it together from some of the the roundabout ways he was kind of describing some of the things, but it sounded as if he wasn't necessarily interested in looking for evidence that supported that hypothesis in and of itself, that it was only focused on looking at evolution, calling into question things on that. And the thing is, even if you find enough evidence and we can say for sure that, well, it seems that the theory of evolution is incorrect, something like that, it doesn't follow that intelligent design actually is correct. Like, it still has to be substantiated on its own, not just as a comparison against another theory to give it more credence or give it more validity on its side. It needs to stand on its own.
And as we tried to point out at the beginning, none of that is relevant to the issue of whether or not there's a God.
Sure.
I still would like to know how you would prove that intelligent design is a fact, because at the end of the day, it's a big argument from ignorance. They're essentially claiming, hey, evolution can't do this on its own. How do you know that?
Right.
Do you have the exhaustive knowledge that would allow you to do this? And the other thing that they do is something that he alluded to, which is, well, I see small changes, but I see no evidence that they can add up to big changes. And to me, if we took pictures of my watch every 4 or 5 seconds for the next hour, and the pictures were time-stamped from the camera, and lined them up, what the intelligent design community is basically saying is, yes, I see that you have a bunch of differences, but I don't see that they add up to the conclusion that your watch is actually keeping time. That's bizarre. If we had an hourglass here and we took pictures of it at intervals and it kept getting smaller and smaller, the intelligent design community would be arguing that, well, yes, I see that the volume of sand in the top of this device is getting smaller, but I don't see that you can actually construct a sound hypothesis that connects these together to show that they actually drained out over time, because that's just too big a change. They don't understand that every small change added to another small change, added to another small change, is how you got from a fetus to an adult human being. You can't look at that span and say, oh yeah, I see a whole bunch of little changes, but you can't argue for big changes. Yeah, you can. That's the nature of change. Oh, well, it just doesn't seem like it. We've had enough time. I don't know, 4.5 billion years. Humans have been around for 100,000, 200,000, depending on where you want to start counting. I suppose if you might want to start counting it 6,000 years ago.
Oh, yes, that's sure.
When God created
four
us.
to 6,000. 4 to 6,000.
Yeah, something like that, depending on who you talk to. I don't know. Let's see. Who we got? We've got Jasper. Thanks for waiting.
Hello?
Hi, Jasper.
Hi, can you hear us?
Talking?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. How you all doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm Jasper. I'm calling from Dawsonwood, Georgia. And last week, saw you all shows. And just wondering how you all can be not believing in God.
How can we not believe in God?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Why don't you
How
believe,
you all
Phil?
cannot believe?
Because I didn't see
How you all
sufficient.
cannot believe in the Lord?
I didn't
Which
see.
Lord?
Yeah, oh, that's another question.
The Lord, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Everybody know that.
everybody knows that. So
Yeah.
all the Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and Scientologists and atheists on the planet know that.
Sir, we know they're wrong. It's,
we know they're wrong.
It's only Jesus. Yes, sir.
How do we know that?
Because in the Bible.
Okay. Why should I care what the Bible has to say?
Sir, because it's the truth. I can't believe you're talking with the tone like that. You're dismissing the Bible.
I don't believe that you're actually a real caller,
explains
first of
everything.
all. But when you say you can't believe I'm
A real
dismissing the
caller.
Bible, I'm asking, all I asked was, why should I care what the Bible has to say? And your answer is because it's the truth. How do we know it's the truth?
It might sound strange to you, sir, because I come from a very religious city in the state of Georgia.
Okay.
And
I don't know how that's relevant to how we know the Bible's true.
because it's how do I explain this, sir? Have you seen how many? Hello?
Yeah, we're still
we're
here.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm having connection problems. Have you seen how big is the book is? How many?
How big the book is?
How many pages it has?
Are you saying that the amount of volume of the book contributes to
Yes,
its
sir.
validity?
The book,
Is that?
the book was written 2,000 years ago. Nobody could write, do anything.
Here's a big book. Should we believe it over the Bible if it's got more pages?
What book? I'm
It doesn't,
sorry,
it doesn't
sir.
matter
It
what the
doesn't
book
matter.
is. You said it was based on how big it was, how many pages it's got. If this book has more pages,
Yes, sir.
then we should believe it instead of the Bible, right?
So, the Bible has beautiful stories. It tells the truth. It tells you how to treat your neighbor.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
I don't believe you for a second.
I'm not sure about that.
I have too much confidence in humanity to think that somebody seriously believes that the number of fucking pages in a book has any bearing on whether or not it's true. But thank you for playing. Thank you for trying to ruin Phil's first day on the show.
Why must you do this to me?
So let's, we'll go to Sam. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Am I audible?
You're audible.
You are.
Hey, it's an honor to talk to you guys. Not going to try and cheerlead you too much, but it's a great show. But I had a question because I've oftentimes heard you say, Matt, that that knowledge is a subset of belief,
Correct.
whereas Aaron Ross says that belief is a subset of knowledge.
He's wrong.
Because if you can't demonstrate it, it's not
He's
true.
wrong. He just doesn't understand this if that's what he actually said. I'm not sure that's what he said. But knowledge is a subset of belief. There's a set of things that you believe, and within that set there is a subset that gets identified as knowledge, which is why traditionally in philosophy, knowledge has been defined as justified true belief. That's not necessarily the only definition of knowledge, but if you're going to define something as justified true belief, then belief is the superset and knowledge is a subset.
Well, that to me kind of lends itself to the idea that you can choose what you believe. It's like
No,
when people
you
say
don't.
You know God is real already.
The definition
Even if you
of
don't.
the definition of belief and how you compare belief to knowledge has no bearing on whether or not you can actually just choose your beliefs. I mean, those are completely separate issues. A belief is something that you accept as likely true. That's it. There is this proposition, and you either accept it, in which case you believe it, or you don't. You can believe for good reasons or bad reasons. I don't think you choose what you believe. I think you can make choices that ultimately result in what you are convinced of. But if you either believe something or you
comes
don't.
first.
What's that?
Belief comes first, in other words.
Well, no, the proposition comes first, and then comes consideration, and then comes the process by which you become convinced. And then once you are convinced, then you have belief. And then we begin to study about when belief becomes knowledge. And is it just a confidence level, or is it something about whether or not it's justified and true?
Okay, I'm with you.
It's
let
like
me give you a quick hypothetical, or
it's like-
for instance,
it's like
this.
Chevrolet
sorry, go ahead.
is a subset of cars. Here's all the cars in the world. Some of them are Chevrolets and some of them aren't.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I was talking about faith with a friend of mine the other day, and tell her how I try not to have faith, go the atheist route. But she's like, well, don't you have faith in, the facts? Otherwise, like, it gets back to like that presupposing logic argument. But somewhere along the line, it gets fuzzy to me. Like, what is actually belief and faith, and what is actually knowing something?
Belief is
Christians
just
will tell you all day that they know.
belief is being convinced that something is true. The how and why you become convinced is where you get to things like faith. People who are skeptics, who have no use for faith, try to make sure that they are convinced only on the basis of good evidence for a proposition. If you have good reasons for your beliefs, you don't ever make appeals to faith. Faith is the excuse people give for believing things that they don't have a good reason for. So
Correct.
So you can believe something that is completely separate from why you believe it, and you could believe it because you just have faith, or you could believe it because you have good reasons, or you could believe it because you have other bad reasons.
Yeah,
Right,
and
right.
I also, it seems to come down to her, the way that you said your friend or whoever used the word faith, because she said that, don't you just have faith in your facts? But I don't think, it doesn't sound like it sounds like she was using faith to mean confidence in those facts versus purely blind belief. So the next time you speak to this individual, you may want to clarify what is she determining by faith, because if you actually have facts and you have evidence, you have substantiation for why you are thinking one particular thing is true, then you don't necessarily need faith in the context of belief with no evidence behind it. So it would be useful within that conversation you have with her to kind of clarify her usage of the word faith and to make sure that y'all are speaking of the same thing, because the way that you just said it, it sounds like she may have been speaking of something different.
And you're going to see this a lot. They'll say things like, well, you have faith that that chair is going to hold you up.
Sure.
No, I don't. I mean, there's a number of different usages for the word faith. I understand that it can apply there, but that usage of faith doesn't match to what they mean when they talk about faith supporting their religious ideas.
Right.
And so I don't use the word faith there. What I say is that I have a reasonable confidence based on evidence and observation that this chair is likely to hold me. And it gives me a confidence level. I didn't sit down here with absolute certainty that this chair would hold me. Trust me, I've had chairs that haven't held up. But I have a reasonable confidence because I'm familiar with the materials of this chair, and also I can gradually sit down to kind of test it. I can bounce on it and do stuff like. So that's not anything at all like what they mean when they say faith, because they have no evidence that they can point to, no observations, nothing. If they say that they believe,
because they're talking about supernatural. It's
right.
all supernatural,
if they say they
right?
believe in the supernatural based on faith, that is the equivalent of saying, I don't have a good reason, so I'm going to use this label that betrays the fact that I might be making claims to absolute certainty when I don't even have enough information to make even a plausible this is likely sort of belief.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm with you on that. It's hard to clarify it. I have one more thing I can ask. You could answer it or not, on or off the call. But I have friends, like, when I got pretty good at arguing these things with people, and I've seen it like really hurt, like crush people sometimes. Like it's hard to watch. You know, if somebody does like finally abandon their faith, it was really doing something for them. And I wonder, is there any kind of ethics that go along the lines of should you or should you not tell somebody what you think is the truth, which for me is the facts of reality, maybe scientism in a sense, or, the scientific method.
My thing on this is that I have no problem at all telling people the truth, but I also usually wait until they are willing to engage, and I'm sure that they're willing to accept what I think is the truth or offer my opinion on something. We don't make outgoing calls on the show typically. I don't go door to door, have you stopped believing in Jesus? I can fix that type of thing. That doesn't happen. I engage in conversations, and if I say something and it becomes clear that somebody's uncomfortable and they don't want to continue, then I don't continue, or I don't make them continue. It's got to be like a case-by-case thing. However, if somebody gets mad at you for merely stating the truth or offering up your opinion, which is not meant as an attack against them, but perhaps an explanation for why you don't share their beliefs, then any offense they take that's their problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
a lot of these people happen to be my family, though.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's something that you kind of have to weigh against, because I mean, you know them better than we do. Definitely, you know how they might react or kind of have an idea on that side. So honestly, it kind of goes to your best judgment. But my take on it is, if someone approaches me wanting to have the conversation, like Matt said, that is the time to kind of engage on that side. And even then, they might not necessarily be willing to listen to you. That may have not been their intent. Their intent may have just been to kind of preach at you a little bit why you should come back into the fold and how did you get so far away, things of that sort. So it depends on if they're actually willing to listen. But if I'm speaking with someone that I really care for and I want a relationship with them, and I can tell that they're not actually trying to have a conversation, then I kind of say, hey, we kind of just back off of it a little bit, because we're not going to get anywhere forward, and it's just going to lead to hurt feelings. And I do care for you, and I, love you wherever the status is. And it's just, that's something that you have to kind of keep in consideration as you're having these conversations, and really see about how you feel about the person. Do you want to continue a relationship with them? Do they actually want to have a conversation? So it's just,
I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression. I just spent 4 days with my parents in Missouri. I would love to be able to have a conversation with them about religion and politics and explain why I vehemently disagree and in some cases despise their positions while I still love them. But we've tried that in the past and it doesn't work. And for the sake of continuing to have a relationship with people I care about, we just tend to not have those discussions. While I would love to change the entire world to rid it of superstition and pseudoscience and religious beliefs, anything that's not true, anything that's potentially harmful, that doesn't mean I have to spend every waking minute arguing with everybody, full tilt. Not everybody gets the 100% Matt press. Even in a conversation with a relative recently, they expressed their political views, and they know what my political views are, and they made the statement that the only thing that they had against Trump was that he was going to put Carl Icahn in charge of something. And I was sitting there and I was wanting to scream, really? That's the only thing that you could... I mean, whether or not you agree with his policies on certain things, that's the only thing you could find that was objectionable about this individual. I know people who are voting for him who find a lot more objectionable than that one little thing. But it's just not... It's not always worth it to jump in and try to have a conversation that people aren't open to.
Yeah, I mean, my aunt's a biology teacher, and she doesn't believe in evolution. So, I mean, it got that kind of
then
thing going on.
Then she should be fired. Actually, that's not true. She can believe whatever she wants as long as she teaches the curriculum.
Right.
So I will retract my claim that she should be fired as long as she's teaching the curriculum. And then if the curriculum sucks, then we need to go after the school boards.
Yeah, I mean, she can't help it. But I'll go ahead and get off, man. You guys have a good day. I appreciate you taking my call.
Sure. Thanks, Sam.
All right. Thank you.
We've got... Go ahead.
I was just thinking how funny of it. You were talking about going door to door saying, have you left Jesus yet? Or how awesome those pamphlets might be. There's just could be some awesome things.
There might be
good ideas out there. But anyway,
the Freedom from Religion Foundation has printed up some things that are kind of not explicitly similar to that, but along those lines, informational pamphlets, and we give them out at things like Pride Festival and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago or 3 years ago at Pride, we wrote up a kind of why we're here thing, because it's the most common question of why are you atheists out here with a booth at the Pride Festival? Mm-hmm. And it was cool to actually write that up. You have to actually sit down and think, hey, why are we here? What's this got to do with it? Yeah. Oh, well, it's got absolutely nothing to do with atheism. It does have quite a bit to do with humanism. Yeah. And it does have quite a bit to do with church-state separation. Right, when we live in a country where the privileged religious positions are denying LGBTQ communities rights. Fortunately, things are getting better.
Yeah, slowly but surely. There's
marriage
still,
equality, don't ask, don't tell went away. It's at least not as bad as it could be.
Yeah, just a few more things to wrap up on that side, but hopefully there's a little bit ways to go on that side. But
all right, in Los Angeles, we've got Ty waiting. Thanks. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I recently broke up with a girlfriend of 2 years. She's Buddhist, and what led us to our breakup was that after much time thinking about it, having our arguments, I realized that if we were to have kids in the future, she would want to raise her kids Buddhist, and I would want to raise my kids, to be skeptics, and that would cause a lot of conflict. But in the weeks after our breakup, I started to realize how much I really do love this girl, and I started to consider whether or not it would be possible to have a situation in which she takes the kids to the Buddhist temple, and it would perhaps provide me an opportunity to on the side teach them in being skeptics and teach them in evaluating the evidence for their beliefs. And so I'm basically wondering, is it possible for something like this to work out, or would it just cause us to regret making the decision to get back together?
Well, of course it's possible. There are people in relationships with kids with different religious beliefs, and somehow they make it work. And there's always the possibility of compromise and everything else. And not all religions are created equal. They're not all equally harmful. Is it the best idea in the world? Probably not. But I'm not the person to be giving advice on this, actually. My thing is, I don't think that kids should be instructed with anything having to do with religion. until they're a little older. And then my solution is to teach them as much as you can about every religious belief, and including non-religious views, and spend the bulk of the time teaching them how to think and not what to think, to give them critical thinking skills and skepticism, and just have confidence that, they're free beings. They're going to make up their own mind. And if you've given them the right tools and expose them to good information, then hopefully they should be able to, make a good decision, or they will be convinced or not convinced of something. I don't know. Did you?
Right.
Well, I was just going to see, you were saying that was it possible for this to work out for you, but I guess my main question to that is, have you spoken to your girlfriend or former girlfriend about this? Have y'all gone in depth as far as how it would work and kind of tried to work out things that way? Have you actually discussed this with her to see how she feels about you being atheist or wanting to teach her children skepticism and critical thinking, things of that sort, along with her wanting to teach them her Buddhist, the Buddhist religion? So have you talked to her? Like what? That's kind of like the crux of what's your answer your question is.
Mm-hmm. So it was a very emotional breakup, because to me it seemed very apparent that atheism and any other religion wouldn't go well together, because it would cause conflict for two individuals who weren't, or I myself am capable of having those kinds of conversations, because I feel very confident in my lack of belief. But she tended to be quite offended whenever we would have those conversations. And so my fear was that in the future, if we were to have kids, that, we could be fair, sure. The children being told one thing, being told to believe one thing is not bad, because I feel I have the confidence to convince them otherwise.
So hang on.
What that might do.
So I kind of object to this idea of setting up dueling religious perspectives as a way of teaching. So number one, as Phil pointed out, there's got to be more communication, and it's got to be open and honest between the two of you. For me, if you think you would be happy sharing the rest of your life with her, despite your disagreement over religious issues, if you never have kids, then you should probably be okay with the idea of sharing the rest of your life with her with kids as well. Because if the two of you can work together and work out those differences between yourself and set up a reasonable compromise between adults, then this shouldn't be too difficult to make concessions. So there are plenty of people who were raised in religions and found their way out with no help. And yet, and there are also people who were raised without religions who found their way in on their own as well. But to go into this thinking, oh, well, I'll let her teach them her religion and then I will undermine it, I don't know that is a really good example of critical thinking and skepticism. You can certainly show why you don't agree, but the bigger thing is to teach them how to think so that they can figure out, okay, do I agree with this? Do I agree with that? Or something else entirely? So I don't, we talk about, for example, like homeschools, and a lot of homeschools are very religious. There are also atheists who homeschool, and there's this terrifying fear from the religious that we're just indoctrinating kids into atheism. And I don't advocate for that any more than any other sort of indoctrination. I don't set out as a goal to create little atheists. I set out as a goal to create little reasonable thinkers. I just happen to think that those reasonable thinkers will not be religious.
Right. I see. I'll give it more thought. Just to be clear, neither of you think that, of course, ideally I would be with someone who's, who has the same views as me, but, given my interest in continuing the relationship, do you think that, you've stated that it is possible, of course, and I understand as well.
You could go find yourself an atheist girlfriend, get married, have kids, and they still turn out religious because they live in a world where hey, I want to go to church with my friends, and the churches use that. Right. And in some cases, when you say, no, I'm not going to let you go with your friends to your church, that just might drive them to the church more. So instead of playing these, little games, open and honest communication with both your partner and your kids, it seems to me to be the key. When I talk to kids, I try not to talk to them like they're kids. I pretend like they're real people, even if they're not.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. That was actually very helpful, and
Sure.
I'll think about it a bit more and try to open up the line of communication.
Sure. Thanks,
All
Ty.
right.
Good luck.
Good luck.
So as a reminder, after the show's over, we get together and go to dinner at Threadgill's. It's 2 or 3 lights up that way. Take a left, and then it's around, and you'll see it. It's like old home-style cooking and stuff. They'll put the address up on the screen here. It's right over that way, whatever. Actually, both of these two, I probably will have a lot to say on, and I'm not quite sure that's fair. All of them, actually. We'll dive into the fray here with Marcus. How are you?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Phil. How are you guys doing?
You're doing well. How are you?
Good.
Thank you. Well, let me first start off by saying that I'm a big fan of the show. I was raised a Lutheran, got myself out of it in my 20s, and only recently started getting into the works of Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, the New Atheists, and was pleasantly surprised and when I was notified by a friend of mine that this show was available. And I gotta really hand it to you, Matt. I've learned a lot from from all your YouTube clips. So thank you. First of all, thank you for everything you do, and keep up the good work.
You're welcome, and thanks for the compliment.
I find myself in something of a sticky situation. Because of everything we see in the news regarding the terrorist attacks, especially with what happened over 9/11, the attacks in Belgium and Paris, and whatnot. I think Islam has been a subject that's been in the public limelight for a while, and from my interactions over social media, from my interactions with the public, there seems to be 2 major lines of thought that I find particularly disturbing. On one hand, it seems to be the argument that I think Donald Trump would favor, in which he seems to be painting the entire Islamic community with a broad brush, and which is fairly bigoted.
Yeah, there's an element of fear mongering in that broad treatment of anything, but he's doing it with respect to Muslims. Yeah.
Right, but on the other hand, when I look at the far left, there seems to be a really disingenuous commentary saying that these attacks, these circumstances, have absolutely nothing to do with Islam whatsoever, and I find
that's
that
bullshit
argument
as well.
disingenuous.
It's straight up bullshit, but I don't think that view or that commentary is as prevalent as it might appear. I think what's happening is that there's this reaction to the let's paint all Muslims as evil by a portion of the left that are willing to, every time there's an attack on Islamic ideas, saying, hey, wait a minute, that's not all Muslims. There's millions of peaceful Muslims out here. And I don't think it's fear, as some people have said. I think it's actually an honest attempt to make sure that we're not painting with too broad a brush, and it might go too far. The problem here is religion isn't one thing. There's a whole bunch of different religions.
Right.
And it's true, that is also true for every religion. Well, Christianity isn't one thing, and Islam isn't one thing. It's not even 2 things.
Absolutely.
And so the way I tend to view it is, you have the foundation of the religion, which is the text that they point to, be it the Bible or the Quran. And then there's a second layer, which is the history and tradition of what has generally been viewed as orthodox, or maybe a handful of varieties of orthodox interpretations that form that second layer. And then there's the third layer, and perhaps a fourth, where those interpretations break down into different denominations and then to the individuals. And so you could look at it as this tree branch that begins at the Bible or the Quran and branches out to the individual. And so the question becomes, what is Islam? Is it this person and everything up their branch, or do we cut it off at the denominations, or do we cut it off at the orthodox interpretation, or do we cut it off at the book? And I think that in truth, you would have to say that Islam is all the way out to the individuals, just as Christianity is all the way out to the individuals, and it's a bad idea to try to lump it in one bucket. But if you go back, I think you can inject at any one of those tiers really bad ideas. There are really bad ideas in the Bible and in the Quran. And how the orthodoxy has treated those, and then how the denominations has treated those down to the individuals. So when you say, is this terrorism because of Islam? The answer is absolutely yes. Their holy book, the orthodoxy, certain denominations, and certainly a bunch of individuals, as their religious identity, have these ideas within it. And the same thing is true for Christians. Pick a religion, But the problem that we face is in identifying what segment of everything that would be called Islam or Christianity are we talking about when we say that this is because of Islam. And what I've had to do in the past when we were primarily talking about Christianity, I primarily address what the Bible has to say and get interpretations on that and point out what I object to. And I point out that if what I'm criticizing when I talk about Christianity doesn't fit what you believe, then clearly I wasn't talking about you. And my problem is that all of these individuals are using the same labels, Christianity and Islam, pointing to the same holy books. And if they're not delineating and distinguishing themselves enough and joining me in combating the evil elements of them, they don't get to complain that I'm painting with too broad a brush if I'm trying to be precise and they just happen to be standing next to the person I'm painting.
Well, actually, that's something I hoped you would be able to help me advise me on. And for the record, I completely agree with everything you said. I've been following some of the, I've been following several of the works of the Muslim reformists who, like Majid Nawaz, for instance, who seems to be interested in bringing about the equivalent of the Catholic Reformation, or which happened in the 17th century, I believe. That seems to be responsible for the
I think the Protestant Reformation,
religious beliefs we have today.
You're talking about the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and
I actually got into it on Twitter the other day because somebody, out of the blue, when I don't think I've ever said anything about a need to, or a desire to, or me promoting the idea of reforming Islam, they came after me with this, who are you atheists to make declarations that Islam needs to be reformed? And I replied to them by saying, I want it gone, but I'll accept reform as a half-step measure. I want all religious ideas gone. I want people to give them up for good reasons. I would never legislate religions away. But I definitely want bad ideas and ideas that aren't supported by reason and evidence to go the way of the dinosaur. And I wish we had the dinosaurs back, or at least some of them.
Of course, yes. But one of the, I've spent the last 8 months pretty much looking into religion, Christianity, and Islam in particular, and I've only recently begun to open up my voice, mostly in private and occasionally on a public forum like Facebook or social media, which sometimes I question the utility of.
Me too.
One of the arguments I get into is that Now, to be fair, I haven't read through the entire Quran, or I haven't even explored all the canonical hadith yet, or anything like that. But I know quite a bit of Islamic history. One of the counter arguments I get into with a certain segment of the population is that, well, there's bad stuff in Christianity too.
Yeah, that's
and
the
I try to
typical
point out
fallacy.
that the Christian that religion has in a large way been reformed, been quote unquote reformed and modernized. You get I think for example Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, is a devout Christian, so to speak, but I think, don't quote me on this, but I think he'll bluntly say that that if you're going to argue for Christianity, don't argue against evolution, because that's a losing battle.
Yeah, I know. He was the head of the Human Genome Project and this stuff.
Yeah.
The thing here is, when they say, well, there's bad stuff in this other religion too, the fact that they included the word too is an admission that you were right to point out bad things in theirs. They're just now trying to deflect it away. And whether there's bad stuff in 1,000 other religions has no bearing on whether or not what's in theirs is bad or not. So in that case, they're almost trying to say, okay, we're not as bad as these other people. Well, that's a wonderful idea, to accept an idea, because it's, hey, I'm gonna think here. Let me go with the idea that's not quite as bad as this other one. Why not go with the one that's not bad at all, or perhaps least bad?
Sure, and I try to make that argument, but like some of the people I argue with tend to demand more evidence. So I try to
I have to pause. I have to pause for 1 second, Marcus, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm in any way suggesting that one should pick the least bad. The primary concern is that whether or not you believe something. It should be whether or not you have good reason to think it's true. Right. There are plenty of true things which are bad. You might have cancer. That doesn't mean that you should believe you don't because it's better. Ultimately, it's not better for you because you're not going to get treatment. I just wanted to clear that up. Go ahead.
Sure. And the some of the what I try to point them out to, is that I don't think that that Islam has quite made it into the modern world as well as say Judaism or Christianity, because at least not from what I understand, that they haven't quite had the benefit of being beaten up by modernity. And like nowadays, it's really easy to point out the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment, the discoveries in the 19th century and whatnot. But I got to admit, I know very little of the attempts to, other than a few names, the attempts to try to reform Islam. And from what I understand, their equivalent of the Catholic Church, again, don't quote me on this, but is pretty much the Wahhabi Salafists based in Saudi Arabia. That's exporting Wahhabi Islam, and they haven't been able to reform that because they've been able to insulate that from society. I was wondering if you might be able to tell me if there's any truth to that at all.
The real issue here is one of power.
Sure.
You can't have a reform if what you're trying to reform has an established significant power base. And so there's Islam, and then there's Islamism, which is essentially the state, the merging of church and state. Yes. Okay. And as long as there are Islamic sects that have power and control, and in this case, armies and governments, a reform isn't likely to happen in the same way that other reforms did. When you talk about, the Protestant Revolution, this was just a bunch of people saying, yep, we're done with your religion. We're going to take the parts of it we like and keep it for ourselves. And when you talk about, Islam not making it into modernity in the same way that, Christianity has, there's a whole bunch of cultural factors that go into that, into how those things changed. But basically, you could also view it as the ones that you're calling modern are the ones where there are more and more people who disregard what's in their holy book, disregard the orthodox views from history, and are trying to hang on to the last scraps of their religion and make it make sense with what they know and understand in a modern world. That doesn't necessarily happen in Islam, in Islamic states. And it's unlikely to. I mean, you're always going to have some people who are pushing against it, because the truth is there are good people everywhere. And there are people who say, hey, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the absolute perfect, unalterable word of a divine being, but maybe the thoughts of some man. And they try to glom on to whatever truth they can because they can't take the full step of just getting out of it entirely.
I see. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I hope I may be able to ask at least one more question.
Sure.
I've decided to talk about this issue more and more often. I started taking some attempts to do so, reaching out to people who have completely polar opposite views. Like several weeks ago, I engaged an individual who was making blanket statements against all Muslims, and it was very satisfying for me to be able to finally calm her down and to get her to show her that there are a lot of good people in that religion that we shouldn't be going after, or yeah, exactly. But I got into a conversation with someone who has a complete opposite view, and that conversation did not end well at all. It's like the individual was disingenuous. She stopped short of calling me a racist,
that takes a lot of control.
True enough.
I have simultaneously in the same conversation been identified as a regressive leftist and a racist. Here's what's happening, and it's not just the atheist or secular community. This happens in a lot of conversations about a lot of subjects. We seem to be losing any hope of realistic nuance. It's not that we're dividing communities or dividing along lines. The divides have always been there. What we're doing is expanding the gulf between them, or I guess actually subtracting the gulf between them, so that there are more people who are more polarized than ever before on some issues. I am constantly troubled by the fact that, particularly, at least with with what I do, I run across secularists who are seemingly incapable of recognizing any nuance. They are on occasion more apt to draw straight black and white lines than people I've argued with for decades. And it's frustrating, and I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it ties right into a debate I've been having with myself. And it's like I think the discussion between these two opposite views, they have to be reconciled, and if we're to deal with it effectively. I think some of the reformists like Majid Nawaz, Raheel Raza are trying to bring that to everyone's attention, but that's the most important thing we could do as a community, is to bring honest criticism to the faith as a whole in itself. And I've considered raising my voice a little bit more strongly and doing a little bit more outreach through private communications and through posting, like on Facebook and whatnot. But on the other hand, I think it's almost like coming out as an atheist in a heavily religious community. There are definitely social consequences to take into consideration, and I've been encouraged to do it in some cases. I've been discouraged in others, and
I'm probably somebody who would somewhat discourage it, but I want to be clear about that. First thing you should probably do is contact the ex-Muslims in North America and talk to former Muslims and talk to Muslim reformists and ask them what kind of role they would like you to play. Because as a non-Muslim, I'm assuming you're not a person of color.
No, I'm not.
So there is this problem of folks like you and me jumping into situations where everybody involved thinks we have no business. And they may well be right, that what we're doing is counterproductive, that you're coming in as the white atheist male savior of whatever. So the best thing to do is to ask those people who are most closely involved, what can you do? Whether it's just be supportive of their efforts, direct people to their efforts, do they need another spokesperson? We've had this conversation before about, how do we increase diversity in the atheist community? I remember when they called when I was sitting on my couch when we were doing the show Guerrilla Style, and I was like, why are you calling to ask the pasty middle-aged white guy? Like, I don't know what the solution is. But what I did was I reached out to Black non-believers, Hispanic American freethinkers, those people who are involved in this, and said, hey, should I be vocal? Okay, yes. And in what way? How can I best help? Because otherwise, you run the risk of looking like somebody with a messiah complex who's trying to fix the world. And, well, I would imagine most of us have that to some degree. Otherwise, we wouldn't be involved in doing this.
Sure.
Sometimes it's best to find out what the people most closely involved want you to do.
And to really help to ensure that you're not really kind of talking over them or taking the mantle away from where it really should be focused. Like, I can't stress that enough. That's what Matt just said, to reiterate that point of really talking to the most effective group and seeing how you can best aid them from their point of view. And that's I can't stress that enough on that side. But
okay. Well, thank you for taking my questions. This has been a subject that's been bouncing around in my mind for quite some time, and I've wanted to see if we can get some of the some things cleared up. But I'll open the floor up for any other callers right now, but thank you
Sure.
both very much for what you do. And like Matt, I very much enjoy listening to your shows and podcasts. So I hope you all continue to do this. It's fantastic stuff.
Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate it. You know, what we were just talking about, this is tied to a number of different issues.
Yeah.
About the process by which one is considered an ally, a good ally to a particular movement. And it doesn't change. It is, here are the people who are most closely involved in this. They get to pretty much define what they find as beneficial and helpful and what your role is going to be.
Yeah, let alone how they actually feel about what has happened to their community. Like even in this this last Orlando shooting in the gay club in Orlando, it was, you know, in that LGBT population, there was a lot of support coming from a lot of different places. Of course, you know, people showing things online, but to really know how someone felt, because even for me going into different gay clubs, this is not as well known, but say if I were to go and ask someone out or something like that, or show interest into someone, then there's been some violent repercussions because of, depending on the individual and how they feel, because you, of course, insulted their manhood, because how dare you suppose that I might be, you know, gay or something like that. And so yeah, that happens. That has happened. And I've seen it happen to others, and it also has happened to myself. That's still a thing that goes on. But
there's an aspect of that I could understand because of the conditioning that somebody's had, that they might be weirded out by it. Because I can remember, you know, I talked before, I can remember a time where if I saw two guys kissing, it was kind of this like, whoa. And then, you know, by the time Don Elton got married, it was like, oh. And now, you know, if somebody hits on me, I don't care who you are. How could you not look at it as a compliment that somebody wants to have sex with you? I mean, especially if you look like me. I mean, I know everybody out there mostly wants to have sex with me, but they don't all say it all the time.
Of course.
So, of course, I'm going to take it as a compliment.
Yeah, but for that purpose, like when you go to a gay club, that takes some of that tension off. Like, this is a place that you feel safer to be yourself, to actually show that interest in another individual. You couldn't imagine how much that can have. That doesn't mean that you're going to be successful or that someone is actually going to take an interest in you at all, of course. But you feel better in your own element and more secure in yourself to actually pose that question without as much risk of a violent resentment. And for something of this caliber to happen in this space, that you felt a lot more secure about yourself, that you could be yourself, you could go out and have a drink and get on the dance floor and don't not care about what anyone else thinks. You're just enjoying yourself, being you as much as you can be, and something happens in this space that you've held to this degree. It was gut-wrenching when it first hit, before anything else as far as the reasonings or the motives that were behind the attack. It was the fact that, you know, I go to places like this and it hit you right in the gut. When I first read that headline, before reading anything else about the shooter or anything about him at all, it was just that this happened in this place where I felt
it strips away a layer of safety.
You know, it really does.
Even though you weren't in Orlando, it wasn't your place.
You weren't there at all. But
and I don't go to clubs because, you know, I'm old. But from now on, I will only go to gay clubs.
Yes,
because, you know, once you've targeted what I consider to be one of the shining beacons of the community that we've created, where we went from, we haven't solved all these issues, but we've improved things to the point where there is a place, and from what I hear, it's fun.
Awesome.
And people are just trying to enjoy life. And for someone to demolish that, to chip away at the safety there, to make, after all of the effort to try to shut this down, even if that wasn't their intention, this can have that kind of effect, then all I want to do is support it more. So from now on, unless there's just not one around, you will, if you see me at a club, it's probably a gay club. Because if I'm going to pay for overpriced drinks, they're going to get my money. That's just the way it should be. All right, well, here's a Phil calling from Phoenix. Phil in Phoenix.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can.
I'm here with Phil. Phil?
Hey, Phil.
Hey, is your Phil a 1L or a 2L?
Oh, that's important.
It's 1L.
All
See,
right.
that's the way to do it, Phil. I appreciate that.
Solidarity, Phil.
Oh, yeah.
Glad we can take your call. So what do you have for us, Phil?
Yeah, Matt, I've heard you say on several occasions, actually, that you that not only do you not believe there's a God, you believe there is no God, which is so I guess first question is, do you still hold that position?
Yep.
Yeah, I was wondering what your justification for that is.
Sure. It's. I've tried to find a way to make it as simple as possible. First of all, I'm not claiming that there is absolutely nothing anywhere that might qualify as a God. I'm only talking about gods that could be proposed as interventionist and manifest in reality, the kind of gods people say they tend to believe in. I'm not saying that, for example, a deistic God that doesn't interact with reality in any way, I have no way to evaluate that at all. There's a bunch of reasons, including the fact that we know people have made up gods, and we have yet to find any gods that we have confirmed were not made up by people. But the big one is that people have popularized this saying from Carl Sagan that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. And Sagan was right in what he meant, but it's used in a way that's absolutely wrong every time I've heard it used. Absence of evidence for a claim where we would expect evidence to be is evidence for absence. It's not confirmation that the claim is false, but it is evidence against it. If you tell me you have a pet cat and I come to your house and your furniture is intact and there's no litter box and there's no water bowl and there's no cat that I can find and there's no food bowl and you don't have cat food around the house and there's no cat toys, I'm going to start to question whether or not you could really have a cat. All of the evidence that I would expect to see is not there. And if we look at this and you say you have a cat and we find absolutely none of the evidence we would expect to see for the cat, that is evidence against the proposition that you have a cat. And I find that to be the case for all the gods that have been proposed, that I've evaluated. The world does not, the world as we understand it does not make sense under the various God models. When you talk to the believers and they offer you their propositions about the how and the why of God doing something, none of it makes any sense. Their gods are actually intellectually and morally inferior to the people who wrote about them in the first place. They have the worst plans, the most banal reasons for doing things. You know, the book that I'm working on, which is called If I Were God, starts by asking a lot of those questions. Why would I create anything in the first place? What's my purpose for this, and et cetera? And so when I look around, none of the God claims have managed to substantiate their burden of proof. And yet there are a bunch of them, and there are probably as many individual God beliefs as there are people who believe it. And we know they can't all be right, but there's no reason we can think of that they couldn't all be wrong. And so I think that it's more likely that they are in fact all wrong because, and my best argument for the non-existence of at least an interventionist God is if there was a God that someone could be aware of, then either that God wants us to be aware of its existence or it doesn't. And if it wants us to be aware of its existence, we would be. There's nothing we could do to prevent a God from making its existence apparent to us. That has not happened, which means that either no God exists or no God wants us to know it exists, or at least wants me to know it exists. And those two are indistinguishable to me, and neither of them are my problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess in a way, if we would expect to see some sort of evidence for a God, you know, like a Christian God, for instance, or what have you, and we don't see any evidence, then at that point, if you're trying to justify belief in a God, you'd have to, basically bend over backwards to make excuses for why it's not appearing when it should.
Yeah, there's not enough evidence for me to believe, and there's so much evidence missing that I actually believe that the proposition is not true in most cases. But that's also not a claim to absolute certainty. And the reason I don't often try to defend the strong atheist position is because it unnecessarily shifts the burden of proof.
Yeah, no, I understand your reasoning for not jumping to it initially, because that really what you've offered isn't proof.
Nope.
But it's I can see how that would be enough.
And I can't even put a probability on it because you can't calculate the probability of unknowns.
Yes.
So,
and that makes sense.
But this is just a visceral thing that not only have the religious claims failed to meet the burden of proof, but they've all failed to meet the burden of proof. And in the situations where we've put them to the test where they could have provided proof, they failed on that one as well. And it seems to me that it's far more plausible or likely, even though I can't put a number on it, that they're just wrong. It seems more likely that human beings make stuff up and make errors in their thinking, and that sometimes the things that they make up or the errors that they make turn out to be beneficial to somebody in some way, even though they're not true. Plenty of things that aren't true can be beneficial. And that we'd rather cling to those things that are beneficial. The problem is they might also be harmful. And you might only be focused on the beneficial aspects and not on the harmful aspects. And I think you need to keep your eye on the entire game. But I want to get to one more call because we're already over time before we close out today. But thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a very thorough answer. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. And we've got David who has a question, and I'm going to let Phil take it to close out the show. As a reminder, when we're done, we go to Threadgills. The address is up on your screen right now. David in Biloxi, Mississippi. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Pretty good. Phil's here too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Phil, sorry.
What's going on, David?
I was just having, not much. I was just questioning about, I've heard it a lot on YouTube from recent videos that I've been watching about hallucinations. And I kind of wanted to give my experience with hallucinations and delusions that took me a while to figure out that they were hallucinations and delusions, and that it is possible for people to do so. So
you wanted to talk about that, the fact that you have had hallucinations or things that you recognize now as hallucinations. Did you not recognize them as hallucinations before?
No, I did not.
Ah.
So how did you recognize them?
Well, it took a long period of time and a lot of talking with a therapist and a psychiatrist to figure out that they were delusions and hallucinations and that they were in fact not reality.
Okay, yeah.
I also tried testing them in different methods, trying to figure out if I could replicate the same effect or obtain a different answer or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to understand how your call relates as to the show.
I was just trying to figure out maybe I could try and shed some light on some things that could be a delusion or hallucination that maybe an atheist or a Christian or Muslim or whoever might believe in, that they could probably just try and seek help for, or maybe see if there's another way that they could go about looking at this idea.
Yeah, so it'd be cool, especially if there was a specific example. But one of the things that I repeatedly try to be clear on, religion isn't a mental illness, and not everybody believes because of things that could easily be classified as illusions, hallucinations, delusions. They believe because they're convinced that it's true, and they may have bad reasons, but they don't all necessarily fit into the category of hallucinations
and delusions
or anything along those lines.
Yeah,
but some of them might. And so if you could just give one example and how you came to realize that it was a hallucination or delusion, that might be beneficial to somebody.
Okay. Well, for example, I used to be a believer in God. I used to think that he could perform miracles and stuff like that. And one thing that I found that could be a hallucination was that I would perhaps see things move around by themselves without any motion or anything like that, and that could be.
Sure. Okay. I mean, that type of thing has been used in spiritualism and ghost hunters and other stuff like that, poltergeisty type stuff. So, how did you come to the realization that seeing things move around like that might not have been reality?
I came to the conclusion that in order for these things to move around, they'd have to have a force or something acting upon them, and I may not have been entirely in a sane state of mind at the point in time, because I was the only one in the room when these things happened. There was no one there to verify whether or not these things were true, and I could not get the results to replicate again, even while doing the same stuff that I was doing before.
There you go.
Okay.
I think the first thing you said was actually a mistake, but the rest of it was fine. Reaching the conclusion that there must have been some force acting on them. Okay, cool. But you don't have any way to assess that. I mean, you can't exclude the idea that perhaps there was a supernatural, because that would then be question begging. You would just be assuming that anything you saw moving without an apparent force was a delusion, when in fact it might have been moving because of a force you didn't know. The real crux of it that you got to was the inability to replicate the results and to have anybody else verify what was going on. It's been said kind of jokingly that reality are those things that don't go away when you stop believing them, and also that reality are the things that you and I both accept are true. This idea of independent verification is critical to our discovery of the universe that we inhabit. And it's the reason why we have, going back to the first call, peer review, the attempt to replicate results and verify results, and the attempt to falsify results to show that the conclusion they've reached is in fact not correct, or that we can set up this scenario in such a way that their hypothesis about the explanation is shown to be not true. All of those are aspects of critical thinking that depend on an understanding of skepticism, the desire to believe things that are well supported by evidence. And that doesn't mean that you didn't experience something just because you were alone. It doesn't mean you didn't experience something just because you can't replicate it. What it means is you need to evaluate the confidence that you put into your understanding of an experience with relation to how likely it is that these results are consistent with reality and could be replicated or could be verified by others. So, and that's not the crux of everything about religion, but it's certainly one aspect. David, thanks for the call. Thanks to Phil for a wonderful first show. We've gone a few minutes over. We'll be at Threadgills. The address is down there. We'll see you all again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Brett.
Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of The Atheist Experience. You know, The Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.